we are. Okay, I'll mute everybody in a second. You'll have to unmute yourself now, Mick. And when you're ready, make a start. Yep, it's all there.
It's okay. Yeah.
Yep, that's fine. Yeah, just get rid of your thumbnails on the left there.
Yeah, I want to get rid of those, don't I? From the beginning. There we are. Ah, I've got all this gubbins at the top.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to go back again. Oops, what am I doing? Oh, I'm trying to go back again. No. How do I go back?
Down the bottom left, have you got any? It depends on what machine you've got. Sometimes it's down the bottom left, sometimes it's other places.
No, I'm showing everything in advance. I think I better pull out.
Okay, come out and then start again.
It's
I can
new
never
share.
how you go back actually.
Sorry, I'm sorry to mess you about here. Pause the share. Stop sharing. Right, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there. Try again. Right. Share sound, optimize video, because we'll need that later. Open up. Okay. Slideshow from beginning. No. What has gone wrong? I'm going to try it once again. Right, click on that. That's where I want to start from beginning. Oh, crikey. Anybody got any ideas? I mean, you click on the, wait a minute, there's a ghost. Hang on.
Do you have a page up?
There we are.
Key up. Here we go.
That's it. I'm okay now. Yeah. I just remembered I've got these little ghost arrows in the left-hand corner. So I tend to use my mouse, and usually using the left and right-hand button, that was okay. Sorry to waste your time. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. It's lovely to see so many faces on the screen, and I know I'm going to enjoy myself because this is one of my favorite collections, which I started many years ago. And it's one that I've gradually been building up it since. And as you'll see from the sort of itinerary in front of you here, it covers, I think, something for everybody, because we've got the history and the precursors of the stamp, and then the archival material, the projects and the proofs and the sheet printings. Then we move on, I think, possibly to my favorite area, booklet printings, and finally postal usage. There's a bit of what you might call postal history there, but what postal history I do collect usually tends to be rates orientated. Right, I thought we'd start with a bit of history here, just so that we can put the stamp into context. And this is a map that I found which shows France during the time of the relief of the Battle of Orléans, led by Joan of Arc, and it shows the parlous state that France was in 1429. The red areas show the parts of France that were occupied by the English, and therefore basic English territory. And the orange parts are those occupied by Burgundian troops, who likewise were allies to the English and very much against the current occupant of the French throne. And the green, what's left of it, split into two parts, was the French kingdom, the larger part being to the south and a small sort of enclave to the northeast. I think we might interesting to look at different parts of this map, and you'll see what a state France was in at the time. Northeast corner there, as I said before, is that little enclave there of the part of the province of Lorraine, and it was surrounded by the British on one side and by the Holy Roman Empire on the other side. And so if you look at that little inset, you can see where Joan of Arc was born, Domremy, just inside the French area. It was an area that suffered terribly from incursions from the English. And if you've ever seen the French version of Joan of Arc, the film, it shows the brutality of the English. And it could be one of the reasons why Joan and her family and other people in this area were very anti-English, whereas in other parts of France where there was English occupation or nearby, the English were more tolerated, if not in fact welcomed, certainly in the Bordeaux area. I want to skip the middle one for the time being. If you look at the bottom inset, I think that is an incredibly complicated instance of what it was like in France. Right in the heart of this area, you've got the town of Orange. Well, I think those of you who've been to France will know Orange. If you go driving down the autoroute down the Rhone Valley, you'll hit Orange. And that was at the time an independent, and wasn't exactly a principality, but it was an independent dynasty, shall we say. And Orange, the family, of course, of Orange was the family that joined the Nassau dynasty of Western Germany, well, what would be Western Germany today, which became the Dutch monarchy, which then became, of course, the English monarchy with William of Orange, and then became the name given to the Orange Order of Northern Ireland. So quite a connection there between Britain and Orange. But Orange was not isolated from France, it was isolated from the Papal States, because surrounding it in blue was the Papal State of Avignon, where, of course, for many decades it was the seat of the Pope. And Provence at the time did not belong to France. It was attempting to be an independent territory, but at this particular time it was very much being fought over between the King of Naples and, well, beg your pardon, it was ruled by the King of Naples, René III, but there were always threats from Aragon to the west and from Sicily to the south, so quite a turbulent area of what we would call France today. But returning to that middle insert, that is the area that we're going to be considering today with this particular stamp, because it shows the area of the Loire Valley where Joan of Arc went to after having heard her voices and having been persuaded to take up the cause against the English. She did get her uncle, who was the governor of what was the place called? Biancourt, to give her arms and to give her an escort through the English territory to go and see the Dauphin, who was in the town of Chinon, which you can see just to the southwest corner of that inset. So she had to get to Chinon to convince the Dauphin, who was the disinherited son of Charles VI, who had just died, that he was in fact the new King of France, and that he should basically gird up his loins and fight the English. So you can see Chinon there, say in the sort of southwest part of that insert. The source of trouble at the moment was in Orléans, because you can see there that the English had got as far as the River Loire. Now, that River Loire there is Loir. It is a tributary of La Loire. This is Le Loire, but the tributary of the Loire is the river to the south, and you can just see it there going across from east to west. And Orleans was on the River Loire, and it was the English were trying to get across the bridge there to the south side. They had managed to besiege the city, but it was still putting up a fight. And that's where, of course, Joan was going to focus her attack. And it's a nice little map of the time, I think, showing how Orleans was besieged, completely surrounded there by a little bit of pink, representing the English troops. So that is the situation in which we're in, and what France was in 1429, at the time when Joan of Arc convinced the Dauphin that she could inspire. To say lead is not the correct word. She didn't create the strategy for fighting or for attacking. She just inspired them spiritually and by example in leading the forces against the English. But this was a make or break decision by the Dauphin to defeat the English. Now, because of the importance played by Joan of Arc during this the war between the English and the French, the 100 Years' War, there had been cause for a long time for her to be beatified and hopefully later on canonized to become a saint. And there was considerable movement from various sources in the 19th century. And the main instigator of this idea was Félix Dupont-Loup, who was the Bishop of Orleans, and he led these efforts to promote Joan of Arc's beatification. And there was promotion from other sources, and I know nothing about the person on the this gentleman called Brison, but you can see an essay that he did because he thought it would be a good idea to promote Joan of Arc on a French stamp. And at the time, the letter rate was the 15 centime sage in blue. And he thought, why not produce something to replace it? And there was that image of Joan of Arc on a stamp. So there was a proposed stamp there. It doesn't belong to me. It belongs to a friend of mine, Jean-Paul Fournier, who I've known for many, many years. And like me, he's a big collector of Joan of Arc and also of Marianne de Muller. Philately as well, there were various private printings of postal stationery to support this idea of beatification. And we have got an example here from 1894, which shows the 5 centime sage printed on it. And then the letter cards on the right-hand side from the next year, 1895. Some were issued with the sage stamp imprinted. Others were sold without or with an adhesive attached to it. Right from the following year, after the Battle of Orleans and the raising of the siege by Joan of Arc, there were celebrations 1 year later on the 7th and 8th of May, and that annual celebration has continued ever since, almost without a break, except for a period shortly after the French Revolution, when the church was suppressed in France, but it returned in later years, and also during the First and Second World Wars, the festival was not held. But this enormous festival held in Orleans has been the focal point of all the activities in Orleans to the very, very present day, and each year it just gets bigger and bigger and better and better. And to celebrate also the festival, there have been numerous souvenirs produced, starting off with the medallions. So you can see some medallions there on the left from 1868, 70 and 72, and also with the printing of vignettes. Don't forget, at this time, vignettes were not necessarily printed to go onto stationery, onto envelopes. They were printed for people to buy and stick into albums just for collecting vignettes, almost like scrapbooks. So you do find them, obviously, these vignettes on stationery, on posted stationery, and it's not easy to find them tied onto the stationery. Most of these would have been put into people's scrapbooks. But those you've got some of the early ones, they weren't produced every year. I've got the ones that have been produced, except in one or two minor occasions, but they've got the vignettes from 1899 through to 1907. In 1912, Orléans not only celebrated the festivals for the relief of Orléans, but also it was the 500th anniversary of the birth of Joan of Arc. So some rather splendid vignettes were produced showing the statue of Joan of Arc by Fouillatier, and that statue is in the town centre of Orléans. And the stamps were printed specifically for the 500th anniversary. If you look on the left-hand side, at the very top, you've got the first printing of the brown one, for example, which was in a deep brown. And then they did a second printing of it and overprinted it with the dates of the festival. So it was dual purpose. And at the bottom there, you've got a rather nice sort of recto verso offset. It's the stamp above it, and that's been printed on the back of it. But what I have been looking to find, I know it's not tied on the card, which goes against my principle, but it's the only one I've ever seen, which is rather nice. Someone who's bought that card to celebrate the festival has not got one with the overprint on, so they have written on the dates themselves, and the handwriting does match the handwriting on the side of the card. And then on the right-hand side, we've got further examples of these vignettes tied to covers. Further on, we've got other examples here of vignettes used in 1912. There was a plethora of them. And I only collect vignettes that were actually produced in Orléans. There were obviously lots of vignettes produced for the centenary, for the 5th centenary of her birth in other towns, in Paris and Compiègne and Rouen. But I only collect the ones that were produced in Orléans. And again, I've got some examples here which are tied on cover. In 1920, Joan of Arc was canonized, so eventually she was made a saint. But basically, the main celebrations were being held in Paris and in, I think, Reims, because it was such a major event. It was more than a localized event as the normal festivals were in Orléans. So in Orléans, it was very much a low-key fete that they put on, festival that they put on, and they only produced one little miserable vignette there in 1920. The one where it's got facsimile underneath, because that's one of the few that I've not yet been able to get for myself. But at least the card in front, it shows that it was even Jeanne, yes, it was Marshal. Yes, Marshal Foch was present at the festival there, but it was no more than a short military parade through the streets. Now, these are slightly now, the next few are slightly out of chronological order, but they are grouped together because the ones I'm showing you now are all produced by the same printer in Orléans, a chap called Marcel Marron, and he ran the Librairie Jeanne d'Arc because it was in the Rue Jeanne d'Arc in Orléans. And he had this little shop with his little printing press at the back, and he sold basically religious artifacts, religious souvenirs, little statues, statuettes, prayer cards, but he also printed vignettes, and those I do collect with zeal. His other main printing initiative was printing postcards, not only of Orléans, but also of the festivals themselves. Now you've got his business card up there on the top left-hand side, and on it you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, and I've enlarged it on the left, his logo, which I think is a very attractive logo. Marron means chestnut. So his logo is a chestnut leaf with the initial M for his first name, Marcel, alongside. And I think it's quite attractive. And it appears on the majority of his cars. For some reasons, they are omitted on certain occasions. But here you've got two postcards here printed by him, and you can see the logo in the bottom right-hand corner of each card. And he also produced those labels there in 1909 to celebrate the beatification of Joan of Arc. And where I can and where I can afford to be able to, I do like to get either a full sheet or a part sheet where we've got his name on the bottom. The letter in the top right-hand corner is a letter from him to Charles Desvergnes, who was a sculptor in Paris. And basically, Marcel Marron was his agent. And any little statuettes that Desvergnes made, they were sold through him in Orléans. And on one occasion, Desvergnes was commissioned to produce a larger statue to celebrate the beatification of Joan of Arc. And that's the statue that you can see on the postcard in the bottom right-hand corner, which is in one of the smaller churches in Orléans. Here again is another sheet of stamps, or part sheet of stamps, labels printed by Marcel Marron, likewise in 1909. And on the right is a letter from Desvergnes, the sculptor, with his own little vignette on it. It's got his statue actually portrayed in the vignette. Porte timbre, scamp collars, were produced by Marcel Marron. On the left, we have got three that were specifically produced for the 1909 Fête de Jeanne d'Arc, the festivals. So we've got the three mint; those were the only colours that he produced, and then we've got two examples, one on piece and one on cover. And on the right-hand side, another design that he produced for Joan of Arc. But I've added to it one that he produced exactly the same year to promote Philippe VIII, because as I put down here, you see upon the death of his father, the Duke of Orléans became the Orleanist pretender to the French throne, and he was known somewhat prematurely to monarchists as Philippe VIII, and there were vignettes and vignettes and porte-timbre were produced promoting him as a future monarch, but it's not really Joan of Arc. The fact it's Orléans, the fact it was printed by Marcel Marron, I've included it on the page. Another splendid initiative of Marcel Marron was in 1913. These postcards that you see were from 1912. They all portray events in 1912. But the vignettes alongside them are celebrating the festivals in 1913. And what he did quite simply was he reproduced the postcard of the previous year within the frame for the vignette. So each of those vignettes there match the postcard of the previous year. It's worth noting on the left-hand side, you've got a young lady there representing Joan of Arc. As far as my research goes, that was the first time that a girl was allowed to portray Joan of Arc. Up until then, they felt that it was a religious slight to have a human being representing a saint on horseback, or a potential saint on horseback. And so they would have a page or someone representing the military carrying her banner in the procession. But eventually they decided that they should have a girl representing Joan of Arc, and they do to this day. But there are conditions to be met. The girl must have been born and bred in the Orléans or the Orléans region. She must be educated at a state school, the lycée, in lycée or around lycée. She must be involved in charitable work, And most importantly, and this is rather unusual in a secular state, she must be a Roman Catholic. And to this day, those are the criteria for her selection. And again, you can go back to the cards again. You can see Marcel Marot's nice little logo in the corners. Now they trying to think of his name, Théophile Chollet, was the mayor of Orléans in 1928. And it dawned on him that in 1929 would be the 500th anniversary of the relief of Orléans. And so he wrote to the PTT to suggest that a stamp be issued. Now, approaches had been made to the PTT in the past to have stamps to celebrate, for example, her canonization, but they refused because, being a secular state, they could not celebrate a religious event. However, on this occasion, Chollet was able to put forward the argument that they were not celebrating a religious event, but a historical event. And so a competition was organized for artists to submit designs for the stamp. The current stamp for the letter rate was the 50 centime line sewer, and so the 50 centime was retained for the value of the stamp. On the left, you've got an example of the sort of maquette that was submitted by each artist competing for the prize. This one was submitted by one of the runners-up, Fernand Bivel, and again, it's in the collection of my good friend. At the bottom of the artwork, you can see there are four photographic reproductions of the stamp in actual stamp size, and that was to give the jury an idea of what the finished stamp would look like. On the right-hand side, you've got the top two are photographic reproductions that are in my collection, so I haven't got the original artwork. I don't know who's got that. We've got another one who was from a runner-up, somebody called Verrec. Joint fourth was Abel Mignon. The second prize, and this illustration here comes from the archives in the Musée de la Poste, was by Henri Scheffer, of course, who produced numerous stamps later on in his career, right up to Marianne de Scheffer. These are two other designs that were presented, but did not materialize as the winning design. On the left, our friend Marcel Marot came up with a design. He got fourth place, but he wasn't going to waste his time and his money. He'd done this design. He therefore later on, when the festivals began, produced die proofs of his design that were printed on rather nice quality paper with the embossed logo in the bottom left-hand corner. In the middle and the right, you have got the design that was submitted by Georges Desmoulins. Now, Georges Desmoulins was the son of Louis Desmoulins, who was the director of the State Stamp Printing Works at the time. But Georges Desmoulins, the son who did this design, died shortly after the awards were announced. And so as a tribute, Georges Aurier, one of the printing works' resident engravers, engraved the design in the form of a collective colour proof, which he presented to the grieving father, Louis Desmoulins, in memory of his late son. Now, how many of those proofs were printed, I don't know. You find them coming up from time to time in auctions, and they say there's anything between 4 or 12 copies of it. It's a very much sought after item. I can say here and now that I did not pay any magnificent price for that, because at the time, this must have been about 30, 40 years ago. Some of you may remember I was writing an article in the journal on Georges Aurier and his designs. and Stephen Holder came up to me and said, "Look," he said, "I've got something done by Georges, by Dumoulin, by Aurier, sorry, by Aurier. Would you like to have it?" And I said, "Yeah, how much do you want for it?" He said, "Oh, he said, I want £14." It seemed rather an odd sum, but so that was quite a bargain. Thank you, Stephen. Here was the winning design, and the artwork there is enlarged again from a photographic reproduction, which is in my collection. I haven't got the original artwork. And this first design, the winning design, was by Gabriel Barlang, and it's believed to have been based on that painting on the right, which is in the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Orléans. There were features there that were not liked initially, and I will comment on those in a few moments. But that was the design there, and certainly the one thing that stands out, I think, is her face. She's got a wonderful expression on her face, which is somewhat spoilt by the rather high brow that she has got. The news was made public in November, end of November. So it was in December that it was appearing in the newspapers and the monthly magazines as to what this design would be. On the left, you've got an extract from l'Illustration, and on the right is a colorized version of the artwork in Le Pèlerin, which is a Catholic magazine. And something which I came across, which I couldn't believe, that this champagne company in Épernay had used the design from that artwork and put it on one of their champagne labels. However, the design, as I said, was criticised a little bit. There were issues, and Abel Mignon, who had been one of the runners-up in the competition for the design, was asked to do the engraving, but he was called in and he was told to make adjustments to the design. Firstly, the hair had to be brought down over this rather high brow. And Barlang, in fact, did a modification of his artwork to show what it would look like. So we got the retouched artwork there on the left showing the revised brow. But the other thing that was criticised was that the designer, Barlang, was reminded that this stamp was issued to celebrate a military event, a national event, not a religious one, but nor was it to celebrate a event linked to the monarchy, because the country was now a republic. And so therefore both he and Mignon were told that the fleur-de-lis on the flag should either be removed or reduced to a state that they were barely recognizable as a fleur-de-lis. So when you look at the engraving there, and I say I've put that enlargement on the top right-hand side, this is the final artwork and the reduction there. It shows there the fleur-de-lis on the banner there, reduced to a point where you haven't got a complete fleur-de-lis. You've either got a bit of the top or a bit of the bottom. So that would keep the monarchists happy and the anti-clericals happy. This is the die proof on the top left, which was printed on a chalky surface paper, and color proofs by Abel Mignon. Not strictly color proofs, but it's the best word I can give to them, because they were never presented as such to select a color from, but there were just suggestions by Abel Mignon as to what colors could be used. But he wasn't far out though, because the color on the bottom right hand side is pretty close to what was chosen. One was the color that was chosen is the one on the left hand side there, and that's the PTT color proof of it, ink number 101, which is royal blue, which I think is rather strange that after all this trouble about the anti-monarchists not wanting the fleur-de-lis, they actually choose a color that's got the bleu de roi as its name. However, having said that, that was the chosen one. When the stamp was printed, it was in fact quite a different blue. So perhaps the anti-monarchists did come back and say, look, we don't even know the name of the ink. So we'll have this this darker colour here. And the presentation proof that you got on the right was in fact the final colour. The first day of printing then of the sheet stamps was the 14th of February 1929, and that's the dated corner block there, the top left. And the last day of printing, was the 11th of June 1929. And again, I've got a dated corner block from that. But they're all very much that darker blue. You do get slight changes in shades of ink, but they're not anything really that's worth worrying about. What you do get, which is very noticeable, there are changes in the types of paper. You get white paper, grey papers, and cream papers, or chamois papers. You do get shades of papers, but I'm afraid I'm not particularly excited about that, so I haven't got a necessarily extensive collection of shades. Varieties, very few varieties. The printing wasn't a particularly good quality printing. And you do get, this is one of the major areas that's been discovered, where the black ink from the reservoir that was printing the date at the bottom of the sheet managed to bleed into the design of the stamp. And at the bottom, you've got a bit of private publicity there. Real Aiglon simply got sheets of stamps, took them down to the local printer to have the center margin, the gutter margin overprinted with their advertising. And just to show you then the difference then between what was coming off the original die and the sheet printing, you'll see that there was a considerable reduction in quality. I think everybody was really disappointed with this. Barlang was disappointed. He was accusing Mignon of doing a deliberately bad job because he didn't get the first prize. But in fact, I think it's simply because of the nature of the printing process. The lines have been engraved quite finely on the original die from which the picture on the left has been taken. The impression has been taken, and the right one on the right are very thick, broken, uneven, and a lot of ink has been caught up and not removed by the doctor blade. But when you look at the sequence through which the printing process goes, you have your original die, you take a secondary die from that you take 50 lead copies, that you then have electroplated to produce a master plate, from that you take a wax mold, from that you make 4 more electroplated service plates. Those are then curved and screwed onto the Chambon rotary press. They get given a last spit and polish, and then the stamp is printed. So you can imagine that there is a gradual deterioration in the quality of the image. And what is interesting is clearly there was some retouching done, because if you look at the bottom left-hand side, they've had to file away the frame. You can see how the bottom frame of the stamp has got very, very thick, and they've had to file away part of the frame to make Barlang's name more legible, and to lesser respect on the right-hand side, where the frame has been filed away to show Mignon's name. The first day of issue, well, there wasn't a first day of issue announced in this document here, and I'm obviously delighted with them. The Musée de la Poste, they sent me a photocopy of everything they'd got some years ago now when I did my first article. And it's always been a source of information and interest. And the only document they'd got with any reference to a date was this one here, dated 19 October 1929, when they're basically saying that the stamp is going to replace the 50 centime Soa. And then at the bottom there, it simply says Mois de Mars, month of March. So, okay, it's going to be sometime in March. And really, the first day of issue has only really been established, I would say, over the past 20 odd years. Lots of catalogues are putting down the 11th of March or just saying March. but a number of us have managed to collect together enough of these first day covers, so to speak, and they have got the date the 2nd of March on. So we can say, I think now with confidence, they are no longer the earliest date known, but they are the first day of issue, because there is something very much in common with these dates, that they are all in towns which had a connection with Joan of Arc. I've managed to get Reims, which of course is where Charles was crowned in the presence of Joan of Arc, Orléans itself, and Paris. So those are now very much accepted. The 2nd of March is very much accepted as the first day of issue of the Joan of Arc stamp. Unfortunately, Théophile Chollet, the person who promoted the idea of this stamp, he did see the issue of the stamp, but he died on the 23rd of April 1929, just a couple of months later, and didn't see the actual festival itself, celebrating the event that he wanted celebrated. Going back to the souvenirs, these are some of the souvenirs that were available at the festival in 1929. First of all, this lovely large medal weighing 44 grams was struck in silver gilt, and there were postmarks, festival postmarks, as you can see here, that were used in Orléans and in the sub-post offices of Orléans as well. We have the little medallion there dangling on a ribbon. That is a very lightweight, it's a pressed metal, and I think that's something that was probably given away. The red and yellow being the colours of the coat of arms of the city of Orléans. Quite a contrast between, say, the silver gilt one at the top and that little tin one at the bottom. There were vignettes produced. The official vignette, if that's the right word for it, is the one at the bottom, the strip of 3, which shows the dates of the festival. It was a big festival, went on from the 5th to the 20th of March. But the little private one that you see on the cover there, which I absolutely adore because it's tied to the cover and tied with the special cancellation. They were still quoting the 7th and 8th of May. Presumably they printed it too early before they realised of the new dates. Now we come to booklets, which is my really main area of interest, I think, in these stamps. The production of booklets commenced in March 1929, and the first printings were off flat plate presses, and such printings can be identified by the centre margin, which equals the width of half a stamp, and the panes are stapled to the cover. And where sheets have not been guillotined accurately, the printing data may still be visible. And here we've got B20330, and underneath I've explained what that data means. You've got B is the press operator's ID, 203 is the 20th of March, and 30 is the number of the printing press. And the booklet covers were printed by a private company, Carlos Courmont, who was also responsible for obtaining the advertising contracts, which offset the printing cost. Those were the advertising contracts for the margins of the booklet panes and for the covers of the booklet. And each series of stamps, and a series of stamps was normally a print of 1 million, were for usually for national distribution, but very few of the booklets were designated for national distribution of the Joan of Arc. They were designated for specific regions or towns. But you can see the standard serial number there in the margin. It's got S166 and S165 on the 2 spines there that I've got on the bottom of the page. As I just said, most of the covers and most of the booklets contain the Joan of Arc stamps were for regional or local distribution. And in many many cases, I just don't understand really why, because it wasn't as if it was regional or local advertising that was in them, not certainly in the ones that are shown here. But the regions were designated by initials put in the top left-hand corner of the front cover. And here, for example, we've got in the top left, we've got SP for the Sud-Pyrénées, and then SA for Sud-Alpes, and then O for West, and RP for Région Parisienne. And those are collectible in themselves because each time they produced, did a printing or even a part printing, those initials sometimes would slightly change in their font or font size. Here we've got examples of booklets that were issued for a specific département, and in this case there might be some advertising that was peculiar to that area. In the top left-hand side, this was issued for the département of Doubs, and you can see the Doubs printed in the top of the spine there. And then a couple of towns, you've got Vichy, the top right-hand corner, which has got, again, local advertising. And the bottom left, Rouen, again, you can see that clearly on the spine. And the bottom right-hand side here is a nice one because it tends to contradict things here, because it's got RP for in the top left-hand corner for Région Parisienne, but the advertising in it on the covers is for the town of Reims. So a slight contradiction there. The Laughing Cow affair. Yeah, this I think must be one of the most famous stories in the history of the French stamp booklets. Yeah, there was a considerable outcry in Orléans against the rather irreverent juxtaposition of publicity for La Vache qui rit, laughing cow cheese, below the image of their saint. And so demands for the booklets' withdrawal were sent to the local MP and the Under Secretary of State for the PTT. I've got here a copy of the reply dated the 3rd of May 1929 from the local MP. So that's shown on the left. And I'm very grateful to that Monsieur Chirici, who I again communicated with. He was still living and the honorary president of the Orléans Philatelic Society in the 1980s, and he very kindly corresponded with me and gave me a photocopy of that letter. And in that letter, it simply says that the MP is replying, saying that he has informed the Undersecretary that what necessary orders need to be given to satisfy this demand from Orléans. But the point is that the booklet was not withdrawn. What happened instead was that the PTT issued instructions twice to post offices, once on the 10th of May and then the 17th of July, telling post offices to remove the offending advertising from the booklets before the sale. It appears that some booklets were left intact and discreetly redistributed at a later date in Paris and possibly elsewhere in order to fulfill the contract with the advertisers. And on the right, we see its usage in October 1932. I mean, I think what happened was the order went out, yes, remove the advertising before you sell the booklet to over the counter, but possibly only in areas where it was a sensitive issue. I think elsewhere they were happy to sell the booklet completely with the tabs on. But there's no doubt about it that you do find a surge of covers in the early 1930s with La Vache qui rit advertising on. Again, quite a fun and original booklet. This booklet was not a private printing. What happened was they had the full printing of 1 million, and it was requested by the Toile d'Avion fabric manufacturer, and they were prepared to pay for 1 million of these to be printed, provided they were responsible for the advertising that went into it. The advertising on the stamps could be anybody else, so they're welcome advertising from other companies, but they basically wanted the advertising on the cover and the extra pages. And so the PTT produced this booklet containing 8 pages of adverts, price lists, 2 fabric samples, and 4 pages of illustrated text relating the history of the shirt. Again, as I said, the stamp margins, though, were reserved for other companies. And on the front cover of 4 out of 6 booklets, the porch roof on the right is printed in red. And you can see on the other 2 booklets, it would be printed in black. And so you can see the 2 different porch roofs there on those 2 covers. If you take into consideration the different fabric combinations, because they didn't put the same color fabric in each of the books, they put 2 pieces, but not necessarily the same colors. And there were also, that produced, let me get it right, there were 2 booklet covers. I'm not going to go through the maths, but overall there were 24 variants. So if you want a complete set of the Histoire de la Chemise booklet, you've got to search for 24 of them. Now, these were private booklets, special order booklets, which were requested by companies specifically for their own use. And they were very, very limited printings. And perhaps one of the most spectacular ones was the booklet that was commissioned by Lux Radio in Lourdes. Now, when these were printed, they had to be collected personally by the company from the post office in the town named on the booklet spine. So these booklets here, you can see in the spine, they have got the town Lourdes in script, and you've got there the interior of the booklet complete with Lux Radio advertising. But I think you will agree with me, the quality of the design and the quality of the printing of the booklet cover is exemplary. And there were just 3,000 of those ordered by Lux. There was a philatelist. He was a philatelist, a philatelic dealer, and he was a writer. He wrote several books. Les Bleus de France being perhaps his most well-known significant publication. He had 2 sets of booklets produced. As you can see, he lived in Provins, which is to the east of Paris, on the edge of the Brie cheese area. And he only had 1,000 printed of each of those, one in March 1929 and the second in July 1929. The first one was promoting very much the pochette that he used to make, the stamp mounts that he made, plus the catalogue. And the bottom one was the catalogue and his magazine, his fortnightly magazine. Booklets were produced for the International Philatelic Exhibition in Le Havre. And they again contained advertising entirely devoted to the exhibition itself. According to the records, 2,000 were printed in April and May 1929, but 2,000 seems to be way off the mark because of the number of these booklets that are available on the market. And there was a number printed on the front cover, and we found booklets with numbers way over 2,000 stamped on it, and we found booklets with no number on at all. So I think 2,000 now has to be taken with a pinch of salt. And I think, as one would suspect, that if they were going to be sold at an international exhibition, then you print enough companies, enough copies for sale. Unlike what happens these days when you go to the Salon d'Automne or any other exhibition now in France to buy the latest miniature sheet or what have you, they only produce a very, very small quantity, and which leads to huge speculation. Another booklet at the bottom was produced by Floraven which was a breakfast product, and 5,000 of those were printed and delivered to Bordeaux. And 2 from companies in Nancy, in the northeast of France. One was for Bussin, which was a mineral water, although it's promoting the town as a town as well. And in sharp contrast, one produced by the brewery of Champignelles, likewise in Nancy. And here are some examples used on cover. The Soigné one from Provins on the left there, it has got a stamp on promoting his catalogue, and he used those stamps purely for sending his own mail out. The top there is one from Le Havre, which, as you would expect is on a souvenir cover. And the one on the right, I didn't explain this at the time, but these booklets were given away by Floraven. If you bought, I think it was something like 10 kilos of breakfast food in one go, you get a free booklet of stamps. And those are not so easy to find used on cover, but I've got a nice strip of 3 there on a letter going to Switzerland. Finally, with the booklets, we've got the rotary booklets. There was a short printing of rotary booklets, and they can be distinguished immediately from the flat plate printed booklets by the central margin, which is now the full width of a stamp. And also you have lost the printing data on the margins, but instead you get a sheet number if it hasn't been guillotined off. And then the covers at the bottom are slightly different. They introduced a bi-coloured, 2-coloured cover. All these were for general circulation, no regional circulation at all. But there was one experimental cover which they produced, and that is the one on the right-hand side, which is quite a sought-after booklet. It was only perhaps, I don't think necessarily it was recognised straight away as being different. It's one that's been, I think, appreciated more in recent years. But instead of the diamond edging round, you've got this sawtooth edging around the frame of the booklet, and also the font is very Art Deco font, which they've used now for the heading. Not many of those booklet covers were used. Some contained the 50 centime Joan of Arc, and some contain the 50 centime lined so they're very sought after. And we come now to the last part, which is the usage of the stamp, and we start with what is called a Marion envelope. The stamp was issued basically for the internal letter rate, so but you can't get really many exciting covers at that particular level. But a stamp used with a Marion envelope is unusual. And the idea was that you put your stamp on the correspondence in a position it would appear through the window, so that when it went through the post office and the stamp was cancelled, you had the date of posting on the stamp as well. So the recipient would know and have evidence on the document that he kept of the date of posting. The problem with this, it worked well with envelopes that needed to be hand stamped, but those envelopes did not survive going through cancelling machines. On the right hand side, this is one area I do love. I love these concessional rates, and this is the 50 centime concessional rate France to Luxembourg. The normal UPU rate for overseas postcard was 90 centimes, but it was 50 centimes for Luxembourg. Oops. Oh, dear me. Another concessionary rate operated from 1929 through to 1937, when the post office was promoting its airmail service by waiving the 35 centime airmail fee on selected items of mail, as seen on the left. The maximum amount of airmail permitted on any flight was 10 kilos. But if the full capacity was not achieved with the fee-paying mail, the difference was made up by upgrading normal surface mail, and the cachet lettres transportées exceptionnellement par avion was applied to publicise the concession. So the recipient would get their letter earlier, and they were told why. On the right-hand side, we've got paquebot annex service cover, and it's from the service which operated between Cayenne in French Guiana and Fort-de-France in Martinique, and it departed every 28 days in order to connect with the Saint-Nazaire-Le Havre, to ships going to Saint-Nazaire or Le Havre. As you probably appreciate, I'm gradually working my way up from single usage right up to through multiple usage. Here we've got an example of three stamps on one cover, and that is simply paying the North African airmail rate. So 50 centimes for the postage and one franc for the airmail fee. On the right-hand side, the three stamps are paying the foreign letter rate, letter then written or simply written in Bordeaux, and posted to Geneva. But it's rather in a story which I can't really sort out. I can only assume that the letter was written in Bordeaux, it was stamped in Bordeaux, it was carried by someone who didn't post it until somewhere perhaps on the French-Swiss border, because those are not tax stamps on it per se. They are stamps which are paying for its delivery in Switzerland, and they've been cancelled by an ambulant. So perhaps the letter was posted onto a train going into Switzerland. I don't know. It's a story I can't fathom out, and I would love to know what the real story is. Again, we've got three stamps here, paying the overseas letter rate, and this is an example of one on a ship-to-shore mail cover. Now, in 1929, Dr. Lyle Adams devised a means to deliver and pick up mail from a ship using a light aircraft, and the principle was to have a hook dangling from the plane, which would engage in a large loop held by steel tubing on the deck of the SS Leviathan, to which was attached the bag of outgoing mail. A platform and canvas trap were also assembled to catch dropped incoming mail. So the idea was that the plane would circle the boat twice, once to drop the mail into the trap, and the second one to collect the mail off the hook. Now, the Leviathan left Cherbourg for New York on the 2nd of June, with a scheduled pickup of mail on the 6th or the 7th. But attempts to pick up the mail were made on both days, but failed due to adverse weather conditions. Mail that was prepared was later returned to their senders, marked delivery and pickup postponed. So the Leviathan now was then in the USA, waiting to return back to France. And this it did. On the 12th of June, the SS Leviathan had set off and was outward bound for Europe. And so another attempt was made 60 miles offshore from the USA. The pilot was able to drop the bag of mail into the pickup frame, but the collection was far from easy. Only after 13 attempts did he succeed in picking up the mail bag and reeling it into the plane. The plane then returned to Keyport Airfield in New Jersey. From there, the letter shown was forwarded via Newark to New York, where it reached its destination the following day. And the cachets on it, on the front and the back, record that record that itinerary. Okay, it wasn't what it was exactly hoped for by Adams and the previously, but it's a good example though of this particular format. I don't know how much longer this particular service continued. I don't think for very much longer, because it was too risky, and very rarely were they able to pick up something on the first go. Some examples of Paret pneumatic post. The basic first step was £1.50, so again 3 stamps go on it. The bottom again is the basic rate, 3 stamps, marred by having a 50 centime solar on it instead of a 50 centime Joan of Arc stamp, but that is more than compensated for the fact that the stamps are cancelled by the Place Jeanne d'Arc post office. And on the right hand side, something which you don't see that often, is a second step pneumatic post, which is 2 francs, hence the 4 values. Okay, going up now to 4 stamps on the cover. On the left here, we have got Foreign Express airmail rate, and that underneath is explained. You've got your £1.50 foreign letter, your 50 centime European first band airmail fee, and then your £3 Foreign Express fee. I'm still looking for that rate entirely with Joan of Arc stamps on. Might be a long wait. But what needs to be explained, of course, with the early airmail rates, France devised these bands. I think there were four European bands, depending on the distance from Paris outwards, a bit like the rayon of earlier years. And on the right-hand side, a foreign registered letter rate, that is going to Argentina, and you've got there your £1.50 registration fee, plus your £1.50 foreign letter rate, and now we've reached 6 stamps. So 6 stamps again will pay for the France to Norway airmail letter rate, because your foreign letter rate is still £1.50, but Norway is on the 3rd band airmail fee of £1.50. So then, therefore, your total of 3 francs. And we go further afield, France to Finland, and this is foreign letter rate, foreign registration fee, European 4th band airmail fee, now totaling to up to 5 francs, £5.50. Okay, 9 stamps on a cover. The cover on the on the left was flown on the first flight to establish a direct service from France to Réunion via French Equatorial Africa and Madagascar. The plane took off on the 17th of October and called in at Bangui on 23rd of October, where this letter was dropped off. And the plane then arrived in Réunion 10 days later. And on the right-hand side, we've got a crash cover. On the 14th of December 1929, a Neupoid de Large 641 took off from Algiers on its 3rd leg from Paris to Hanoi, but contact was shortly lost afterwards, as it was flying over Tunisia. And it was not until the 23rd of December that its wreckage and the bodies and the mail were found east of Tripoli by a passing Italian vessel. So the above cover then was franked with a complete booklet pane, which was part of the salvaged mail. It was returned to Marseille, where it arrived on the 3rd of January 1930 and received the Courrier Accidenté cachet, which you can see in the top right-hand corner. It was then dispatched again to Indochina, where it arrived at Saigon on the 29th of January, and from where unclaimed, it was returned to the sender, receiving the arrival date stamp at the 8th of March 1930, and all that is recorded on the back of the envelope. Okay, I have to start counting now. What we've got 16 now. 16 stamps then. one could call this a philatelic cover in the sense that it was going to Stanley Gibbons, but it was in fact commercial mail because it would be carrying commercial goods in the way of stamps from France to England, and it represents the foreign small packet rate with the registration fee added on, £7.50. But the fact the number of stamps there is one in excess of the total amount. But nevertheless, a nice item. And finally, the biggest franking, and this is the biggest franking that's known using the Joan of Arc issue. There are a couple of problems with it. Firstly, one stands out, doesn't it? That there's a 50 centime line sewer there, which should not be there. There should have been another 50 centime. And if you look in the bottom of the back of the envelope, you will see in the northwest corner of the Par-Avion label, you've got one stamp that is damaged there. But it's a lovely example of multiple franking of the 50 centime Joan of Arc stamp. And I worked it out on the right hand side. The letter rate was £1.50, registration fee £1.50, airmail fee 18 francs, which is a phenomenal amount. Well, that is the last of the stamps. Now I'm hoping this is going to work now, because I know I went through this with Chris, and there were various things I had to click and set in order to get this to run. It's a video of last year's Fête de Jeanne d'Arc in Orléans. It only lasts a couple of minutes, but you should be able to see it properly with the sound. I hope it's going to work this time, but with the problems I've been having today, I'm having to keep my fingers crossed. But here we go.
Merci mille fois, merci à tous.
Thank you very much, Mick. That was quite impressive. Very impressive finish. Thank you.
The video worked, did it?
It worked perfectly.
Oh, good.
Anybody who wants to make any comments can unmute themselves as they wish now.
Oh, it was just fabulous.
Mm.
The whole thing was
Good.
fabulous. Thank you.
Good. Glad you liked it.
Yeah, totally amazing. I mean, historically and philatelically beautiful. Thank you.
Well, I am very partial to Joan of Arc. I mean, she goes back to 19. I better get this right, or I shall be murdered by my wife. 1963, 64, I think. I think it was 1964 when my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, said that she needed to think of something original to do for her two theses because she was studying history and theology. And I said, well, I've just come back from France and I had a great time studying in the Loire Valley at the Institut de Touraine in Tours. And I said, that area is famous for Joan of Arc, and it's also famous for Saint Martin de Tours. Why? Let's go on a hitchhiking holiday. So we went hitchhiking down to Tours, and we stayed at the youth hostel down there. And I think it was doing the research down there and meeting the people and talking to the people about Joan of Arc, about Saint Martin of Tours, that made Marion just fall in love with France and more in love with me.
Oh,
So I had to collect Joan of Arc.
How can it get better?
There's a lovely display, Mick. Thank you very, very much indeed. It was really, really
Okay.
high class. All coming from just one little stamp.
Yep.
That is
Yep.
easy.
Yeah.
And,
And a very cheap little stamp. Well, the stamp itself is cheap. The other stuff not so much, but even so, it's what Ashley would have called a common little stamp, wouldn't it? Right.
Yes, it's not very well printed usually, so they're not really very.
No, they're not. It's not an attractive stamp. No.
Great shame, great shame. That was a lovely story. You got some lovely
Okay.
comments in there. Some interesting philately and a very good finish with the parade. We haven't got any more meetings at the moment on Zoom arranged. Nobody's come forward with anything, but if anybody does, then we'll run them as and when they come up. Does anybody else anything they wish to say at this juncture? If not, I think we'll give Mick a very, very good thank you.
Yes.
And see some of you at Charlcote, I hope.
See most of you, yeah, most of them will be at Charlcote. Yes,
Yeah.
That's a large number.
Bit too far for you, Jan, isn't it, Charlcote?
It is for the weekend, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Great shame, great shame.
Yeah.
It'll be a good weekend.
I'll be in
Okay.
spirit.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Then
Okay. Well.
stop recording now, and then I'll close the meeting now, and then we can.
Is there